Captain Peng choosing to join us on stage. We'd also like to welcome Ms. Sikha Singh, the Deputy CEO for Executive Group of Companies, join us on stage. Captain Hari Subramaniam, the Regional Head, Business Relations and Medici Ship Owners Club. Good to have you. Dr. Faisal Qasim, Medical Director, Primary Care Division, Fullerton Health Group, Singapore. And we're happy this plenary will be moderated by Honorary President, the Nautical Institute Singapore, Director of Loss Prevention for the Standard Club, and member of the National Maritime Safety at Sea Council Singapore, Captain Yves Vanderboom. Welcome.
Thank you.
And it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to juggle 2 iPads here and a phone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be back in person at these conferences. It's so much nicer to be able to see everyone and to do this in person instead of only seeing me from the waist up. As was mentioned by the MC, please do submit your questions. I would be really happy if we can get a lot of questions from the audience that we can ask this really great panel that we have here this afternoon. I understand also from the virtual audience that there are a couple of actual seagoing ships hooked up to this conference. So I'm looking forward to getting questions from the crew on board of these ships. Now, when we are talking about seafarer well-being, I found the 2 opening presentations really interesting. The topic of communication is something that we are definitely going to touch on during this panel discussion, and the mental well-being is a very important, what you mentioned on how leaders should behave. I thought that was really interesting. Now, we all know that seafarer well-being has been an important topic for a long time. We've all known that we have to put more attention on mental well-being or well-being in general. But during the pandemic, and maybe that is a bit of a silver lining to the whole story of the pandemic, at least it has been put properly in a spotlight. We all now know how important well-being is. Sadly enough, we have lost a lot of people due to this, but we are seeing a change now. We are seeing operators that are putting more emphasis on the well-being. We can see them, be it through the crew changes used, be it through communication and internet availability on board, be it through better accommodation, physical accommodation, better mattresses, better recreational facilities on board. At least we are seeing a step forward in the whole topic of well-being. We've also seen that there are changes to the MLC, which are coming into force. I'm not going to go into discussion on those. There are people who feel that it should have gone further, but at least it is a step forward. At least something is being put into the MLC for the well-being. Now, what we want to try and focus on in this panel discussion is how is the well-being linked to the safety culture on board? How is it affecting the safety of the vessel? Because if you are having a seafarer who is not physically or socially or mentally well, that will directly affect the safety culture on board. So those are a few things that I wanted to talk about. But before we do so, we asked you all a question during the registration. And if I could ask that the answers of that question are put on screen. The question that we asked you was, in your opinion, which is the one area that a ship manager should focus on when it comes to seafarers' health and well-being that would directly improve safety culture on board? And these are the results, and I found these quite interesting. 41% of respondents have focused on the physical well-being. I'm sure Dr. Faisal is going to be really happy with that. And we are going to come back on that during the panel discussion. But interestingly, a quarter of the respondents are talking about the shore staff awareness of shipboard operations. And I'm actually really happy with that. And this touches on the communication discussion that Captain Peng was talking about earlier. And what we often, if I'm wearing my club hat, what we are seeing quite often is that there is a disconnect between people operating the ship, not the technical managers, the operators, and the people on board. So I find it really important that that is put up as a quarter of the respondents. Now let's touch on the physical well-being first. And we know how physical well-being, how important it is. If you're not healthy, there is a risk to the safety on board. We all know the importance of the enhanced PMIs that are in place by the majority of the clubs compared to the basic PMIs that are mandatory by flag. Now, if I can come to you first, Captain Harry, you are in charge for Medici, which is operated by the Ship Owners Club. And from your perspective, we know that it is reducing the number of illness claims that we are seeing. Why is there still a reluctance from so many ship operators to join up with these enhanced schemes? Captain Ang.
Yeah, thanks, Yves. Just a little preamble, the Medici is actually an enhanced pre-employment medical scheme to start with. And I think that addresses the answers of our poll quite well. So firstly, in line with the theme of today's plenary, dovetailing seafarers' health and well-being with a good safety culture, it's important to correlate how physical health, and safety culture go hand in glove. I'm going to give you a small example, like suppose I have an elevated heart problem and I've got high blood pressure, or maybe I've got an abdominal pain or something, and I'm going to be sitting here wondering which doctor do I see? Have I written my will as yet? For back pain, what do I put? Hot press, cold press? And I'm going to be sitting here thinking about this, and I've not even heard Eve's question. That just shows lack of focus. That just shows if you're not physically at ease with yourself, or if your body parts are not working optimally. Sorry, it's not very medical language. It's more of technical shipping. But it just shows that probably this can lose a lack of focus. And that's where I think a seafarer is no different from a normal human being. So when he's working on board and he's not focused on his job, he's going to be thinking of all the other things on how he can make himself better. He's probably going to not follow procedures, not focus, and this could lead to some accident which can endanger himself or his life and all the people working with him, because it's all not a solo performance on board. And this gets classified as an injury. This doesn't get classified as an illness. So we have sufficient statistics, review of claim files to show, and I'm sure Yves, you'll allude to this, that quite often the deep down, the starting point is actually physical health. And this is something which then affects the person's mood, his fatigue, his rest, everything, and lack of focus. Because we know our seafarers have access to everything nowadays. You need to ask anything, you'll just go Alexa or Google and it'll give you an answer. But of course, we've got so many online training programs exactly to take that. The biggest challenge to answer the question is actually changing mindsets. Now, everybody is in their comfort zone. And there's this very fine equilibrium, the supply and demand of seafarers. And with COVID, it's become even more personified. Everyone's so worried if you it's already very fine, it's so expensive to have crew changes. Now, if suppose I've earmarked a seafarer and I don't get him, then, that's going to lead to so many cost, expenses, and a lot of other things. So that's the main thing. People do ask what's the catch when the club is actually investing money in doing this. We pay over $50 per seafarer to get this enhanced scheme, and they're wondering, what's the fine print? Nothing is for free, So there must be something which you're not telling me. And they try to kind of start doing a reverse engineer or a post-mortem. But then it takes some time for them to come in, and then they realize, and I think the word of mouth spreads. One last point I'm going to take is people are worried about seafarers they've been employing for a very long time. Like, I've got a seafarer who's been sailing with me for 30 years, and along comes your scheme and suddenly makes him unfit. But we have sufficient data to show that the elder seafarers are the healthier bunch, the one over 50, and we have about 75, 76-year-old people also who we've conducted the medical, they are the healthier bunch. The younger generation from the age of 30 to 50 are actually in the red zone. They are the ones who are coming with added stress. They are the ones who are coming with, anxiety issues, cholesterol problems. And I think it leads to a lot of things like Food Panda, Grab, you want McDonald's, you just dial. You can have McDonald's thrice a day. I used to beg my dad, please can I have McDonald's? And if I was really a good boy, I would get it at the end of the month. But here people have it 3 or 4 times a day. It's cheaper than organic healthy food. I mean, you go to the organic section and you can just see Bitcoins like flying all over the place. But if you want to buy McDonald's, it's under $3 or $4. So plus we have these mobile devices, which is the bane of everything, or the boon, I don't know. But people want to rather invest in this, their time, and rather go out for walks and play. I tell my son, you want to play something? What I mean is we can go out and play some badminton. He'll say, sure, you log in and I'll log in. And I said, no, that's not what I meant. So there are a lot of myths over here, which ship owners are apprehensive about. And I think forums like this, discussions like this is where we can actually bust these myths. And then once we are over that, then it's all in the right direction.
Thank you. Thank you, Captain Harry. And if I can come to you, Ms. Sika, from executive group perspective, what are your thoughts on enhanced PMEs, and also more widely on the topic of how can we improve the physical fitness of the seafarers on board?
Yeah, thank you very much, James, and good afternoon to you all. From executive group perspective, if you're talking about this, it is mandatory that every ship, a seafarer that we put on board, he needs to go through a very strict medical examinations. And we have enhanced it to the extent that we know there's certain diseases or certain medical ailments are common, and we have extended those tests as well, so that every seafarer who goes on board, he has gone through it, and we have put a very physically fit person on board. That is, it's well beyond the normal mandatory, whatever medical examinations normally is done. On board is very different things, like the people, health-wise, they have these, we have on our panel, the doctors, they can 24/7, they can contact for any kind of medical ailments. And plus, we have also concentrated on mental health. We have on board, not on board, on our offices, we have psychologists, and they are available for giving any kind of counseling on board. And we have, going forward, we have also launched a program called the Goodwill Ambassadors. Those are the top 4 officers on board, and they are being trained by our psychologists, so that they are at the front, and they can identify whoever has got any medical and mental issues, and they're the first one to identify them, and they can give it over to the psychologist. So we have ensured that the people, seafarers that we put on board, are always healthy, and they have any health issues, they have immediate support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sika. And if I can come to you, Dr. Faisal, from your perspective, Fullerton Health Group gets involved when things go wrong. You are involved on the PME side as well, I understand, but you get involved when things are going wrong on board. Now, if I remember from my sailing days, telemedicine was something we tried to do over VHF with a very broken connection. I think it has changed. It probably has improved. You are having video calls on board of ships now. You can have a much better remote analysis of what the issue is with the seafarer. But in your opinion, how can we further improve telemedicine? And what are your thoughts on 41% of people saying that physical well-being is important?
Right, thanks, Steve. So I'll answer that in 2 parts. I think the first part about telemedicine, that is just one piece of the management of health of a seafarer, or for anyone in particular. It is now evolved. Connectivity is obviously integral, and yesterday we've heard about the 5G initiative. This is well and good. Better reception, better audio and video feeds gives the doctor a bit more confidence in diagnosing and advising. But we need to also decide, or rather think about, what is the next step, what's the next mile after the diagnosis, after the advice. Is there any other room or any other things that we need to look at, like maybe work with another allied partner, maybe with a mental health psychologist, if let's say we detect something else beyond the physical ailment? Do we need to also, we probably have to figure out how to enable accessibility for these medicines, like delivering medication to maybe ships in the anchorage. I mean, we've talked about drones, we've talked about all these IT capabilities, which are probably the next step of a 2.0 version of telemedicine, right? And I think the third piece is also taking a leaf of yesterday's talk about collaboration. I think what's important that the shipping industry needs now is reliable medical providers that can connect, that can share medical data to ensure that the seafarer's health is managed continuously. It is not just a one-off consultation and that's it. There needs to be follow-up, there needs to be data capture, so that wherever you sail to, whichever port of call you go to, or whether shore leave location, everything is still consistent. So that is the bit about telemedicine, how we can evolve, how we can manage better the seafarer. Going back to this 41% physical so-called emphasis, right? So I think just to draw back, I think it's not rocket science to understand that to have safety and efficient operations, you need healthy and well individuals, right? So, and just to share, WHO's definition of what is health, right, is that it must be physical, mental, and social well-being in an individual, with or without the presence of disease. Meaning there are two parts to this. You've got your three components, physical, mental, and social. And there's also that caveat that actually disease, the presence of disease is not important to determine or label someone as healthy. Right, so meaning if you were to hire a seafarer, you take in a seafarer, if you do not invest in a robust pre-examination that caters to the multitude of diseases and also mental health, maybe a screening tool of some sort, right? You might be even if you think that they've passed all this with flying colors, and you don't invest in like what Madam Sika mentioned in terms of being able to detect certain things on board, then you will be actually onboarding seafarers that are inherently not healthy under the WHO's eyes of health, and things may develop later. Stresses, mental health, and maybe undiagnosed chronic diseases may come up. So again, tying in with telemedicine, I mean, it should not be only seen as an acute remedy, an acute consultation, but it can also be being leveraged on for chronic disease management. You can do teleconsults on blood pressure. You can do a finger prick and show the doctor on telemedicine your diabetes control. And then we sort out the last mile in terms of supply of the chronic disease medicine. So these are the kind of evolution that I think is potentially present that we can focus on for this industry.
Thank you. And if I'm going to take one of the questions here, I'll put this up to Mr. Charles first. There's a question, if we can pop that on the screen. Because we are doing the physical health screening, we are doing medical examination at the moment for seafarers. And you touched on this, Dr. Faisal, in your comment just now, but should we require or should we consider doing psychological testing as well at the PME stage? And Mr. Charles, if I can get your thoughts on this first.
That's a good question. Should we require seafarers to go through psychological assessments after the medical or before? Yeah. I think, yes, of course. Me being from the profession, we've been doing this for quite some time. But I have to say it is scary for some seafarers. Some seafarers are afraid of it. Some people know what to expect. They might be nervous. They might present differently. So the results, you have to be careful with what you're doing. You have to know about cultural understanding of psychology, what are the fears, and then you can adjust it properly. So I think educating people about what the assessment is there for to do. It's to help people, to catch people that may not be so fit or should maybe not go out to sea right now, yeah, because they're not in the right space of mind. That's it. It doesn't mean they can't go later. I'll give you a perfect example. About 4 or 5 months ago, I had an assessment and I was talking to a seafarer, and he was in extreme distress, and he didn't want to talk about it, but after about 30, 40 minutes, he shared a couple things with me that was worrying him. It was simple things, like he needed to purchase a car for his wife for shopping. You need to do this, you need to do the insurance things. I mean, very simple things, but they were stressing him. They were stressing his wife. And he was not, he said, well, I'm not really ready to go right now, but I need to go. And I don't want to lose my opportunity. I said, it's not a problem. This test doesn't cancel you for future voyages or any future contracts. So what I did was I explained to him the procedure. I said, let me put a waiting period of 2 months. Is that enough for you to get your things organized? I said, yes, that would be great. That's what I did. 2 months later, we did the test again. He presented differently, perfectly fine, ready to go, and not worried about all the little things that were important to his wife and his family and to him. So I just want to try to take away the fear and the uneducated part about these tests. They're there to catch people that are not ready to go out at sea, that may be stressed, that may be worried, that are not in the right space of mind. They're not there to take people's right away to go to sea. I think that's the main thing I want to say. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Charles, for that. If I'm moving on a little bit, we recently saw the release of the second quarter of the Mission to Seafarers Happiness Index. And I was quite happy when I saw the results because there was a positive increase across all of the 10 questions that the Happiness Index is asking each time. But still, there was room for improvement. I think maybe it was because of the changes to the MLC that the crew is feeling happy and was giving a positive survey, maybe because of improved communication on board. We don't know exactly the reasons why, but at least there was a positive increase of the happiness index, which I think is really good. Now, some of the items are still scoring quite low on the happiness index. One of them is shore leave. It is a difficult topic at the moment because there are still a lot of restrictions in place across certain countries around the world where the authorities are not allowing shore leave to take place. And Ms. Kwa was referring to it yesterday during the opening session. It would really be good if worldwide seafarers are allowed again to go back ashore. Now, never mind that part, we can't control that. What we can control from a ship operation and a ship management perspective, and this is the sad part, we still see some companies that are not allowing their crew to go ashore, even in countries where it is allowed, because they are afraid of the potential risk of one of the seafarers getting COVID, bringing it back to the ship, and delaying the whole ship. But that is directly affecting the well-being of those seafarers on board. So I want to put that question to Captain Peng, because BIL is having a very busy liner service. Yes, you are very busy when your ships are in port, but what are your thoughts on shore leave and how this can be dealt with the restrictions?
I think it's very clear to us, shore leave is a right of seafarers. It's not a privilege, right? And whenever this can be safely done, the sanity should be provided. The advantage we have is we have overseas office in almost every port we go. So we have the local office to support us when we need to. And we have opened up shore leave in almost everywhere except China for obvious reason. So our crew members are allowed to go ashore, and when they are in need, they can contact our local colleagues to get assistance when they're in a foreign port. I think Singapore has done a very good job, MPA, allow shore leave together with some of the leading ports in the world. I think we need to make it very clear to the policymakers, authorities, to make sure that they need to provide this to our seafarers. It has been just too long, 2.5 years, 3 years. Some of them serve long contract, extended contract because logistic challenges. And basically, it's a floating prison for some. I mean, maybe it's not really appropriate to put it that way, but it is how it is, right? So we need to understand the needs of seafarers. We need to support them, to let them go ashore, rewind themselves and come back and work safely.
Thank you for that. I've put up this question. I'm not sure if this is something that we from the panel side can can answer, because it's this master on board of the Atlantic Altamira is asking if authorities are making it easier. Well, I don't know how to answer that from our side, but I'll put it up because we are talking about shore leave. But Ms. Sika, if I can come to you on how are you dealing with shore leave for your fleet?
I think whenever it's allowed, I mean, there is no reason why their shore leave should be denied. But I understand that the COVID and there are situations where probably it is not convenient or it is not safe enough. So we need to consider those issues and accordingly. But in principle, there is no reason that we should deny the shore leave. That's not as a policy.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now, if we take it one step further, and I'm coming to Mr. Charles again, because from the helplines that you are operating, or similar helplines that are available to seafarers, you will immediately see the result. If something goes wrong on board of the ship, if there is a seafarer that has a problem, they will be calling, well, hopefully, these helplines. So from your perspective, how do you see how the mental well-being, certainly as a result of COVID now, how can this affect the safety culture on board of that particular ship? And if I can put immediately a second question to you as well, is there anything that we can tell the ship owners and the ship operators? Is there a way that we would be able to recognize these symptoms in a seafarer? How is a ship owner able to help out a seafarer? How can you recognize it before the person goes missing, basically? Please.
Yes, thank you. So to answer your first question, many issues have popped up because of it. It's interesting because seafarers are actually used to extending their contracts or having to go a little bit longer when it's necessary. I don't think it's about that so much, that aspect. What I want to highlight is what they've told me, and that's the aspect of disappointing the people at home, their family, their loved one, their friends, again and again and again. That's what gets them angry. That's what gets them upset. And as you can imagine, if there's something that's seriously wrong at home, if someone's in the hospital, if something bad has happened, then that, of course, magnifies everything. Yeah? So there's anxiety, there can be panic attacks, there's isolation, depression. And these people need support. They need what I talked about, a good support on the vessel, which is most important, and then access to professional psychologists that can help them manage with some of these difficult emotions. That's it. And to answer your second question, what can be done? How do we recognize that? I could explain to you meticulously how to recognize these things, but it wouldn't serve the purpose of the question. So to answer the question, I would say there has to be proper clinical mental health basic training for leaders, for officers, for people that are on the vessel to recognize these symptoms. It's that simple. When they can see it, when they've trained to see it, when they train to speak up and look at different aspects of it, that's when they can reach out to people and help them and support them before they go missing, before it's too late. So to give a very short and simple answer, there has to be psychoeducation in place, training in place for the right people on board so they can recognize it before it's too late. And it's that simple. And again, if they have access to professional psychologists, to clinicians, they can give them a call and they can ask, hey, I've been witnessing this and this behavior. What do you think? It's the same thing they do when they have an accident on board. If someone's bleeding and say, hey, I've got a wound here, he's cut in this area, they call. And you say, well, patch it up to this and that. It's the same for us. It's like, all right, these are the symptoms. All right, it sounds like he's going through this. You need to do 1, 2, 3 to make sure he's safe, and then let's talk again tomorrow. So it's both training and access to a professional consult. Yeah, people shouldn't be left guessing, especially not with medical or psychological issues. They should have proper support in place. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And that answer earlier, I briefly put up one of the questions before it disappeared. There was a question on suicide from one of the captains and what can be done on how to deal with it, but you will have answered that at the same time. Ah, there it came back. I love these things, they're magic. Suddenly my questions come back. So I think we will have dealt with this question as well. If we move on from the mental well-being part and we go towards the social well-being, we know it is important. I would say even more so, probably, I feel. If there is no social interaction on board of a ship, if you do not create a link between your seafarers, because like in the pictures that Captain Peng was showing earlier, where everybody disappears into their cabins or goes and sit in a corner, how do you create a desire to help out your fellow seafarer on board? You don't, not in my opinion anyway. So I think that is something that we need to work on, is that social cohesion on board. Now, of course, we cannot go all the way the other side and say, no, you can't have internet anymore, you can't have your social media and your video calls, I need you to have barbecues and beer with your fellow seafarers on board. I know that, we can't, but it is about finding that balance between the two parts. Where you give them the internet on board, you also make sure that there are ways for them to socialize on board. And if I can come to you, Ms. Sika, how do you deal with social interaction in your fleet?
Yeah, I think it's one of the very important issue that nowadays, and it's across the industry, you hear about that there's a social interaction is diminishing, and that's, I think Captain had already showed us in his presentation. And that's a real issue. But then what we are trying to do is that encouraging all the masters, all the top management on board to create a lot of activities, and which from the shore we initiate a lot of things, like a lot of competitions, a lot of any festival. So that's a time we find that, and we tell them that they need to, all these presentation, all these competition entries, they need to make a group, not less than 5 in number. So they and ensure that whenever the all presentation, all the entries come, they make their own group. It doesn't matter which department they belong. They can be from captain to with a cadet or whatever it is. So that it's a kind of, we are encouraging from the shore side that any kind of activities, they should continuously do it on board along with their own work. So that's, we find that when we encourage them to do it, and also at the same time, we give the awards along with that. And that's a kind of creates a lot of buzz in the ships, and we find a lot of entries coming to us. And we also put them in the pictures, everything in our newsletters, which go to the ship every month. So this is a kind of, we are trying to encourage them that there should be some social activity at any given point, and then they are involved with, and there is a kind of more rapport within themselves. Yeah, that's what we are trying to do.
I think that's really interesting, because by creating that challenge or competition on board, you bring out the fun part of being social, and it motivates people to interact.
And then the amount of enthusiasm it creates, a lot of entries become, and it's overwhelming. So it indicates that they love these kind of competitions and to participate in.
Yeah, indeed.
And the awards are given, and then we tell them to give the award to the person concerned, whoever got the award, and take the picture, and we distribute all around.
Yeah, indeed. Now I am going to come to this, I don't know, bombshell question. It's always quite an interesting debate when we talk about dry ships. We all know the reasons why. There's been quite a lot of bad apples previously. We all know that it is on a charterer's requirement that a lot of the ships are dry. And Captain Peng talked about it in his presentation earlier. How can you have chicken wings without having a proper beer? which is really an interesting point. From a club perspective, in a way, we sometimes see the flip side of dry ships where the seafarer goes ashore in port and then gets smashed and smashes up things on his way back to the ship and equally causes a lot of problems. So is that the solution? Should we go that way so that we all keep a dry ship and let them smash everything up on the shore side? That doesn't help either. So how can we find this balance between being able to have a beer? How can we convince, or a wine, I prefer a glass of wine, but how can we convince the charterers that the days of those bad apples are, touch wood, behind us now? And if I come back to you, Ms. Sika, from your perspective, what are your thoughts on providing soft, I'm not talking hard liquors here, let's not go the whiskey route. I have a lot of stories to tell about that. But what are your thoughts about soft alcohol?
I don't know what are the soft drinks.
Beer and wine, basically.
Okay. We are a 25-year-old company, and we have been always following no alcohol, zero alcohol on board. And when you're talking about incidents, I do not know those guys, whether they're from the ship where alcohol allowed or not allowed, because that group of people who can create nuisance after drinking could be from anywhere. So, but from our experience, we find that not giving alcohol is not really an essential for their good being, right? So for their health, I don't think it is a kind of essential that they should have this. But so far as our experience is concerned, without that, and we are limiting any kind of incident related to alcohol, and drug and alcohol policy is very strict.
This is interesting, and I'm going to go to the other perspective now to provide a counterpoint here. Captain Peng, your thoughts?
With due respect to Muslim colleagues here at sea, and those cannot drink for health reasons. Okay, personally, I think it's necessary to have light alcoholic drinks on board, and we have been drinking. We have not put ourselves into too much trouble. We have a very clear policy and procedure, and that is controlled by the master, and it's well understood by everybody, right? You go beyond that, you'll go, right? And it's something we like, we enjoy, and we keep our promise. And we do random alcohol tests with our ships. Call anytime and ask them to do a test to show them that we are serious about business, so they know about that. And 99% of them abide by it. Yes, we had incidents, but isolated incidents, but we have not had any big problem. So everybody likes it, and I think we're going to continue until we have a different result from the pool. We did a pool survey a few years ago. Close to 60% of our colleagues decided to keep light alcohol, and that was agreed by us in the office and approved by the CEO. That stays. As what I mentioned just now, the seafarers on board, like we will, they're professionals, they're adults like we are. As long as there are boundaries, clear guidelines that will be observed, will be abided. I think it's necessary personally. Thank you.
It's an interesting, different viewpoint on this. And let me go to the doctor in the house here. Dr. Faisal, how is alcohol giving us a positive or a bad negative influence on our well-being?
Right. Asking a question from someone who doesn't drink. But anyway, but there are medical literatures, published out there that has a positive correlation between drinking moderate amounts of wine with cardiovascular protection, right? So that's a medical point of view. Socially, I think, again, maybe a PME question could be inserted to assess someone's alcohol dependence, to assess the risk should there be exposed to, the various policy of dry ship versus non-one. I mean, alcohol-based ones. So that's one point. I just want to share that sometimes these are very important things that really prevent or rather help them with their mental well-being, because when I was involved in a 10-month-long COVID project in Bangladesh, where we had to quarantine migrant workers coming into Singapore for anything from 14 to 21 days, and they were living in solitary rooms, right? And I had to make that judgment call to allow them to smoke. And that is against the doctor's ethics, right? But thinking about it in the long term, because we are dealing with quarantine facility that's high, that's risky, we decided that, okay, that we can allow some cigarettes being brought in, right? It is necessary socially, maybe, but we have, like what Captain Ping mentioned, strict policy and procedures. You've got limited number of sticks to be able to be brought in, limited duration of using it, and we do a lot of, we were serious about it, so we go our rounds and have a look. So similarly, if there are certain kind of command and control of governance with regards to this, I think it's safe. And it just helps both in the so-called medical point of view and also socially. Yeah, but that would be the wine though. The beers will increase the sugars.
If I can just jump in, Yves.
Yes,
I'm
Harry.
surprised first of all, this question got only 18 votes. Secondly, if it was really a problem, then wouldn't it be a statutory requirement that, there is no alcohol? Now suddenly the expert in the charter becomes even more qualified than a doctor to start dictating terms to seafarers. I mean, as it is, we have enough bones of contention that everything, the seafarers, basically everybody's tail to wag, finally the buck stops here, and now everyone starts dictating what he does on board. And on top of that, you want him to be happy. Oh, really,
I think there's going to be a lot of the masters.
I may add it here.
Sorry.
This policy which we have taken, following this for last more than 2 decades, it's not under any advice of anybody else. It is our own decision, because we think there is a benefit out of it than the negative. So I think it's working for us, and I cannot talk about others, but definitely for executive, it's working very well.
I don't think there is a right or a wrong in this. I think every company makes the decision. They do the risk assessment for their own particular type of trade and that ships that they are in. I don't think there is a right or a wrong as such. But I thought it was an interesting discussion that we had on this topic. And yeah, why only 18 votes? Huh? Come on, guys.
Can we also vote?
Okay. I saw one question here, which has 27 votes. Problem is that I can't read it all the way. Okay. How would the panel suggest ways to improve mental health and well-being of seafarers? I think we briefly touched on this earlier. How can we recognize the issue of mental health and well-being? So I think we would have answered that. Is there anybody that would want to comment on this question?
I have one point on this now. ISWAN, especially since they do a lot of work in this. I saw it recently on social media. ISWAN actually have a course for first aiders, mental first aiders, and they are calling on people to actually come to undergo training to recognize, because that was a topic. Similarly, ISWAN also has a seafarer wellness app. I know people roll eyes, one more app kind of thing, but there is a Seafarers app which actually you all can download, and these are actually put together by experts who say what you can do. I mean, it's not just about listening to good music and the sound of waves and the trees and the branches, but there's a lot of things like you can do as meditation, yoga, food and health tips. It all contributes, and these come from them. So there are free apps like the ISWAN one. Sorry, I'm not marketing for them, but still I am. But these are ways actually they can use to, get more information.
Ms. Sika?
Yeah, I forgot to mention about this, but the yoga I think, is a very good, which we actually encourage, and they've been trained, all our cadets, and all officers are trained on this so that they can practice it on board as well.
I think it is really the importance is making the seafarers aware of what the various options are. Some people will prefer the yoga way, some people will prefer a beer, or every person also has their own preference on how they can. But at least if they know all the options that are available to them, I think that would be a good first step. Now, what I came across actually when I was preparing for this is that the Singapore Registry has introduced a number of additional notations, and I think it was touched upon yesterday. I heard it also, somebody mentioning it. So these are 4 voluntary additional notations that you can have if you have a Singapore flag. One is for green shipping, one is for the cyber prevention, one is on smart ships, and one is on welfare. I don't know the exact criteria of it, but what I do know is that so far only 2 ships have been awarded the welfare category, the welfare notation under this new system. Now, and this came in place from 1st of November last year. So either the criteria for the MPA is having are really tough, or people are not aware that this is a notation that might be available to them. So I think this is something quite well done by the MPA. Sorry for promoting the MPA here. It's really well done that they are putting these additional notations in place for Singapore flag. Now, Nautical Institute, wearing that hat, puts quite a lot of emphasis on training of seafarers. Being a training charity, we really want to emphasize the training that is required or that is available in addition to what STCW is requiring. And of course, we want to focus on cadets for that. They are our future. And on the training part, we don't want to focus purely on the technical knowledge. We need to be able to focus, and our Captain Andre, president of the NI, mentioned this yesterday during the opening session as well. We need to focus on the soft skills for these seafarers. And quite coincidentally, Captain Andre as well wrote a publication about mentoring of seafarers on board of ships. And one of the main points that came out of that publication is that it does not take more than 10 minutes to do a simple mentoring on board of a ship, but share that knowledge that as a senior person you have with the new generation that is coming on. And Charles touched on this earlier when he was talking about how to be a leader. It fits quite well into that. But if I hand it back over before I keep talking, Harry, what are your thoughts on mentoring and how can mentoring improve the safety culture on board?
I think absolutely. I mean, mentoring is exactly what the doctor prescribed. Not you, Faisal, sorry, as we speak. So there's so much that the elder seafarers have gone through, in terms of rudimentary navigation, seamanship, etc. Without the technology, etc., they used to kind of make it work with bare hands kind of thing. Not exactly smoke signals, but... and now the new generations have arrived on the cusp of technology. And a lot of them don't have to do the basics because it's all on a platter. So it's important that these stories are shared so that there's so much to learn from them when the chips are down. Then how people dealt with certain situations may be an extremely good learning curve. We do a lot of mentoring. I mean, as a Nautical Institute, Eves, myself, we undertake a lot of mentoring sessions, and it's all about giving, and we go to the polytechnics, the maritime academies, and we talk to the cadets, we talk to post-sea officers. There's so much to be done, and I think Captain Andre Legubin's book is fantastic. If you haven't, I would strongly advise that you all get hold of a copy and go through it. But even yesterday in his few moments of speaking, he was like, fantastic, a very simple solution, just put 2 cadets on board every ship, and then you've trained the people, you've solved the problem of cadets waiting, and you're solving a lot of things. It could be as simple as that. But yeah, mentoring is as simple as having just striking an interesting conversation, something you can actually gain from an intellectual conversation. It's not a top-down approach. Many people like to think of mentoring as that kind of master-slave treatment where the person, I'm the plethora of knowledge and I'm going to like kind of, fine-tune your thinking, and then when I say raise your hand, it's not going to be that. It's just a conversation. We've undergone mentoring sessions. We give mentoring sessions. We give mentoring sessions at the same time. We are also undergoing mentoring sessions on other aspects. So it's always that circle of life that is never complete. So I think it's fantastic. If you all are at a loss of ideas about mentoring for your seafarers and all that, just get in touch with the Nautical Institute. We undertake a lot of that for the community.
Thank you, Harry. Earlier on, Captain Peng was talking about the communication in his opening talk. And it's a difficult topic there because I mentioned it earlier, the more communication you allow with the family at home, the happier the seafarer might be. But also how the risk is there that all the problems from the shore side are coming to the seafarer. So one of the things there that I'm wondering about, if there is something that can be done, and I think you referred, and I'm going to ask you to repeat it if I can. What can we do to try and have the family have a better understanding of the life that the seafarer has, and what are the good things that can be told, and what are the things that maybe should get filtered?
With connectivity today, the seafarers are well informed of what is happening at home and in the local community from the friends. So there's no way we can bring this back. We can't reverse it. But I think it's very important to let the family and friends, parents, have better understanding of the life on board, the challenges they face, the problems they deal with every single day. So some of the stuff I have seen, I have experienced, I have benefited in the past is Wives Club, carriage of family on board for short voyages, and allow the family to have a deep understanding of the operation on board, the tough life faced by the husband or the spouse. I had been benefited from this. I have seen a Wives Club organized by, my previous employer and the current company. The wives come together for events, discuss the challenges they have to support each other, to better understand the husband's job and challenges they have at sea, so they don't necessarily, cause negative impact to the husband at sea when they are busy keeping watch and, You can imagine that if without even basic understanding, the wife would not understand that the husband is in different time zone, right? And probably he's resting, and then you're going to lag about the kids being naughty, and you want a solution from him, and all this is going to have very negative impact to the husband at sea. We have dealt with a very unfortunate incident. The captain locked himself in a cabin for 5 days. It's just because of an email from his wife. And he's not a young person, he was in his 50s. Eventually he signed off in Maldives, and he really felt sorry about what happened and his behavior. And in these 5 days, he finished 1 case of beer and 5 bottles of whiskey. So I think more should be done to make sure that the message clearly communicated with the family. They have good understanding so they can support the spouse at sea in a meaningful way, as well as the kids. Right? It's tough to have the husband away and to support the whole family just by the wife itself. So, Wives Club is one of the solutions to have the wives from local community gather together to share the concerns, to share knowledges, so they can better support the husband.
Thank you. If I can come to Charles, do you have any comments or any further thoughts on how we can improve the family well-being?
I think hearing that, what you just said, was a beautiful thing, especially social support. 100%, right up my street. The more the families understand the challenges of seafarers, the better they can maybe adjust their communication patterns. But also learning about communication can help these families, right? How can we communicate? Maybe what are we communicating? And more importantly, how are we communicating? Which will affect the seafarer most profoundly, right? I'm not a big fan of micromanaging seafarers. I think this change has happened. They're connected to their families and they want to know what's going on at home. And now the environment has to assimilate and adjust to this. That's just the way it is. That's reality. We need to accept that. Seafarers like to know what's going on. They like transparency. And even if some things are filtered, because they know each other so well, they might worry anyway because they sense something's not being said. So I always believe in transparency and honesty. And I believe that we should make, it shouldn't be us, it shouldn't be the shipping companies, it should be the families and wives or the husbands making those decisions on what can that individual deal with at sea. They are the experts of their partners. They should decide, should he know this or will I tell him once he gets home? Because ultimately, they know this person. They know what he or she can deal with. So I'm a big fan of giving the responsibility to those people who know them best, the actual experts, but offering exactly what you said, the social support where they can get support and other opinions, and offering communication advice on maybe how to communicate a little bit more sensitively or to realize certain things may be sensitive in nature. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to take, we have 5 minutes left, I'm going to take one of the slightly more controversial or more difficult questions that has come in. And this is from a deck cadet, which I really find really good. And we touched upon this earlier. We've spoken about bullying, we've spoken about all these things. But is there something that we can do on safeguarding the female seafarer or cadet, or it doesn't matter, any seafarer for that matter? Ms. Sika, I'm going to come to you on this topic, if I may.
Yeah, actually, we started taking female cadets just about a year or two, and we had done a complete preparation for it. The selection for these female cadets was very thought about, and we definitely wanted the female cadets who were really, really keen about joining this profession. They went through the tests which are meant for the male, the same, but theirs was especially about their family background, whether they are definitely going to, because they are definitely going to face a different situation on board. And after that, we kind of prepared the ships where they are going to be put on board. We had counsel, we had the senior officers on board before they went on board with our psychologists. So the proper preparation was done so that the female cadets, when they go on board, they are prepared to face the situation. And they are very closely monitored. Plus, we have 2 female mentors. They're one master mariner and one chief engineer. They're the faculty for our training institute. They are the direct mentor for these girls who are on board. So far we have found that whoever has gone on board, because I personally keep track of this, and the superintendents where they've gone, I have got the feedback, these cadets are better than the boys even who are on board. So we have seen to it that the possible situation they may face about the sexism and all, they were already negated. We prepared the ground for them, and we think we are going to have no more problem as far as the girl cadets are concerned.
Thank you for that. Captain Peng.
If I can add, I think this is not only for female cadets, if you know what I mean. Okay. I have seen it myself. So I think education is the key to make sure that the company as what you mentioned just now, have a very robust procedure and policy to make sure that everybody is protected against harassment.
I think that is really important. It doesn't, we hear about the stories for female seafarers, but it's not limited to that. It goes way beyond that. And thank you very much for this deck cadet for sending in this question. I also love my timer because it has suddenly jumped up with 5 minutes. Really interesting. Which other question can I do? Dr. Faisal, I'm going to come to you. We've talked about physical, we've talked about mental, we've talked about social, family well-being. How can we tie it all together if we look at this from a holistic perspective? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a very big question, but it's easily answered because I think this concept of providing the best health management that we can is not just for the seafarers, it's for any working community, it's part of occupational health, it's part of public health as well, right? So, but peculiar to the seafaring community, I mean, because of the inherent challenges, I think, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I think there's always scope to emphasize or focus on ensuring that you try and get the most optimum, healthy and fit seafarer wherever possible. But that does not disallow those who are not fit at that point to be coming on as seafarer in the future, right? I mean, there is always room for them to be optimized. So this is a pre-employment scope that might need to be, you know, enhanced, where there is capability of filtering and tiering, and also some form of optimization for them to come back and not deny them of the chance to work. So that's important. That's part of occupational health as well. And the next step, when they are already on board on the vessel, the management of health, physically, mental, or social, I think right now there are capabilities. I'm glad to hear that the different shipping agencies are putting a lot of thought in this. But like I said, I think we have scope to develop this because collaboration is not competition, like what we mentioned yesterday. So we want to make sure that everybody's seafaring community is healthy. So telemedicine and what we call medical continuity is key. And that can only work if you have a good working partner in terms of a medical provider, telecoms provider, and even the local legislation. Because sometimes you might think that it is easy for us to deliver medicine, but because of policies in terms of international borders and whatnot, may make legislation a barrier to enabling this. So that has to come in terms of policy as well, right? So in a nutshell, I think, and of course the last part, of course, the social well-being, I think competition, connectivity, family support, all well and good. But I think, again, maybe as part of, I don't know, this I'm not clear, but I hope that there's continual assessment of an already onboarded seafarer to make sure that they're still at the pink of health, both mental and physical, right? It's not just a one-off assessment at the point of onboarding, but maybe a few, I'm sure there are a few rounds of checks, but I think the emphasis on health, mental health as well, being assessed at that point, I think is key. Because it's a snapshot of that person's health. It's not a chronic diagnosis, right? Charles, you may correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a snapshot of what his mental state is in. And if maybe at the beginning he's fine, but because of the whole journey at sea for a few months, and when you reassess him, he might show some signals that we might need to address early. So there is preventive health, right? A component in this. So I think this is the whole holistic management that we need to focus on, and it can only work if there's partnership between shipping companies, legislation bodies and medical providers that can enable this.
Thanks for that. I'm going to take this first question because it received 25 votes. How can we treat seafarers more important? How can we treat seafarers being frontline workers and they are facilitating the world trade? Okay. How can we treat seafarers more importantly, because they are frontline workers and they are facilitating the world trade. Thanks for this question, Captain Rashid, but I'm not sure what we can answer on this from a panel perspective. I wanted to put it up because it has a lot of votes. This is something that the flag states need to work on, that the port states need to work on, and I think from a Singapore perspective, that really has been done quite clearly. Singapore has put seafarers as frontline workers. I do agree that it is not the same in all ports around the world, and I think a lot more can be done on this topic before, hopefully not too soon, the next crisis comes around. What I found quite sad is that it took the Ever Given to get stuck in the Suez Canal before the world basically woke up to the fact that all their goods arrive by ship. I found that quite sad, that it had to take that much of an incident for people to realize the importance of seafarers, but I don't need to tell you guys this. So if I then move on, I have 2 more minutes. I can do this last question, which I thought was an interesting one as well before we close. How can we deal with the increase in workload? And Captain Peng, earlier you mentioned you have a 10,000 TEU ship with 13 crew on board.
Not us.
Sorry?
Not PL.
Not PIL, sorry, I thought it was one of yours. So there is a 10,000 TEU ship with only 13 crew on board. That must increase the workload on those crew that are there. That may have adverse effects. What can we do on this? And I'll come back to you for your thoughts on this.
Yep, I think it's a problem faced by most operators today. Right, you have to balance. You want to shorten the time in port and make sure the ship is productive and go to sea ASAP. And when you go to a dock, you try to maximize the time you have, and then you can bring the ship out and earn money. Right, that's what the ship's built for. I think we need to strike a balance. We have a clear understanding from the management that probably it's a little bit more expensive to do repairs and maintenance when the ship is in operation, because by the crew themselves, the work can be done is very much limited. So you need to have short teams. So we have done many times in Singapore, in the past in China. So you bring a team of 15, 20 guys go on board to maximize the time in port and get maintenance done. So you reduce the workload of the crew during the voyage, because they may face bad weather. Some of the guys may not feeling very well. And you have very limited resource. So by doing so, you take part of the workload off the crew members so that they can concentrate on important tasks, navigation, to ensure safety and well-being of everybody. I think there's no golden rule, but the operator, the manager, has to decide what is best for the ship and for the company, for the crew members.
Yep. And I'll close on that statement by saying that we all know we have safe manning, minimum safe manning certificates in place. Those requirements are to sail the ship from point A to point B. They do not include the requirements for the active cargo handling, for the maintenance, and on some flag states, even your food is not included in your minimum safe manning certificate. So that is something I feel that really should be emphasized. That is not a goal to reach a minimum safe manning. It's a minimum you should have on board. Now, thank you very much to everyone for submitting the questions. Thank you very much to all the crew that was listening in on board of the ships. I thought that was really interesting. Thank you very much to all of my panelists here for the very engaging discussion. And thank you very much for this.